We've been talking about eternity during this timeless series, and if you missed the first two messages, you can listen to them online at hollychurch.org. And I talked about how we can have this misconception about heaven that we're going to be floating around on clouds, and we've got these white robes with little wings on our backs, and we're playing harps, and everything's very serene and peaceful. Everything's very restful, and rest sounds good, right? But ultimately, how long can a person rest, And honestly, when we think of heaven in this way, it's kind of lame. So, is that all that's heaven is about? And of course, we answered in this series, no, it's not. And this is so important to us because our view of eternity affects so much how we live here and now. And if we think heaven is sort of lame and boring, then we're going to default to living for here and now with little thought about eternity. And here's what the Apostle Paul tells us about eternity in 1 Corinthians, his first letter to the church in Corinth. 1 Corinthians 2:9, he says, "But it is just as the Scriptures say, what God has planned for people who love Him is more than eyes have seen or ears have heard. It has never even entered our minds." So the most creative being in the entire universe, our Heavenly Father, our Creator God, has something even more than you can possibly conceive of planned for you in eternity. It's beyond what you can comprehend. It's beyond, we just sang it, it's beyond your imagination. You can't imagine it. You don't have to live this life believing, hey, this is all there is. This is all I get. We don't have to trudge through life trying to just squeeze joy out of moments. We can live for something greater because our lives are meant for something greater than just this present age. We are meant for something timeless. There are message notes inside your program. You can take notes on. You can fill in the blanks here. The first one, pretty easy. You just put your name there. Well, I think it's easy for most of you anyway. But you just write your name there. Kevin was meant for something timeless. In fact, let's say this out loud together. Don't say my name. Say your name. Are you ready? All right, ready? Go. Kevin was meant for something timeless. You are designed to be timeless. Your soul knows eternity. That's why we never think we're going to die. Even when it's getting close, we're like, I'm not really going to die, but the penalty for sin is death. And what is sin? Well, sin is breaking a command of God. James says if you just break one, you've broken them all. So you break a command of God. God says, this is the way that's best for you. This is the best way for you to live. And you decide, hey, I'd rather live this way. And then you sin. And the penalty for that is death. Have you ever considered, why is the penalty death? Why isn't it like 40 lashes, or you sit in the timeout chair in the corner? Well, because God created you to be timeless. And when you figuratively, spit in His face and you sin, which all of us do, and we choose our way instead of His way, when you sin, you're telling Him, you're saying, well, you're spitting in the face of the guy who created you to be timeless and to love you forever, and the only appropriate penalty for that, then, is death. Now, the good news is, Jesus, God in the flesh, came to earth, and He did not sin. Jesus was both fully God and fully human, but He did not sin. And because of this, His death, He died for us, His death was able to pay the penalty for everyone's sin. God's blood is so valuable, it's the only blood valuable enough to accomplish that, to pay for everybody's sin. So everyone who dies actually is raised back to life. Acts chapter 24, verse 15. There will be a resurrection of the dead. Both the just, those who have placed their faith, their trust in Jesus, just as if I never sinned, Jesus justifies you. It's nothing that you've done for yourself. Jesus does that for you. There will be a resurrection of the dead, both the just and the unjust. That's how powerful the cross of Jesus is. Really, that's how powerful the resurrection of Jesus is. But only those who have set aside themselves as Lord of their lives, and instead follow Jesus as Lord of their lives. Because that's the oldest sin there is. You can be like God. So, people, we want to be Lord of our own lives. But only those who have set aside themselves as Lord of their lives and instead follow Jesus as Lord of their lives are able to enter eternity and not experience a second death. Now we're going to look at what the Apostle John tells us about the second death here in just a moment. But first, contemplate this. God, His name is Jesus. He loves you and He values you so much that He dies for you. So, only those who have, as I said, set themselves aside as Lord of their lives and instead follow Jesus as Lord of their lives are able to enter eternity and not experience what the Apostle John calls the second death. Revelation chapter 20, verses 11 through 15, John says, "And I saw a great white throne and Him who sat upon it. And I saw the dead, both great and small, standing before God's throne. And the books were opened, including the book of life. And the dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books. The sea gave up its dead, and death and the grave gave up their dead, and all were judged according to their deeds. Then death and the grave were thrown into the lake of fire, because there will be no more death. And the lake of fire is the, what?
Second death.
Yeah, second death. And anyone whose name was not found recorded in the book of life was thrown into the lake of fire. Now, I don't even want to experience the first death, but I certainly don't want to experience a second death. And if we forget that we're designed to be timeless and our eternity with Jesus is going to be amazing, then we'll start or we'll just continue to live like, this is all there is. And when we get sucked into living just for the here and now with an inward focus, that's not what Jesus intends for you. What Jesus intends for you is to have an outward focus, to be a blessing to others. And next Sunday, as a church family, next Sunday is our Big Day Sunday, September 29th. It's our fall Big Day. What's a big day? Yeah, Big Day is just where we want all of you in church. We don't want you skipping church, but we want all of you in church. And we also want you to invite others, to be outward focused and to be a blessing to others. And I'm just encouraging you to invite others. And you'd think I would have learned after first service, but I didn't. I left my invitation, so I'm going to borrow one here for just a moment. So inside your program, there's an invitation postcard that looks just like this. And I'm encouraging you to invite 1 to 3 people. You can invite more than 3 if you'd like. And sometimes you're like, well, how do I invite someone? Well, you just go up to them and you have your invite card and you say, hey, Trevor, good to see you today. How's things going? Oregon Ducks, all that, talk a little football. And then you say, hey, Trevor, I'd like to invite you to church next Sunday with me. And you hand them the postcard invite. That's how you do it. So there's one of those inside every program that you can use. There's also some extra on the table in the Connection Center, the room right by the front entryway, if you need to pick up some extras for that. And we're going to begin a brand new message series called Freedom Factor, and it's about forgiveness. And that's a super high felt need in people's lives, whether they believe in Jesus or whether they don't. And we should be more obsessed over timeless matters than out of what we can suck out of the here and now. And what I'm going to talk about now, it affects a lot of people's thoughts. And it keeps them in a state of worry. It keeps them in a state of anxiety. And it keeps them focused on the here and now. And I want to help you change your family tree. Here's what I want for you. I want financial freedom for you. And you say, well, that was sort of a weird transition from second death to this. Well, it's not at all. Because I don't know of anything more powerful at keeping our thoughts focused solely on the here and now than financial bondage, than being worried about your finances. And God lays out a plan for you. He lays out a plan how you can change your family tree, how you can be out of financial bondage, to be free from living for only the here and now. And it's a simple plan, but surprisingly difficult to implement. Here's God's plan. God says, give, save, live on the rest within your means. That's His plan. And it's, like I said, it's a simple plan, but surprisingly difficult to implement. And why is that? Well, there's a couple reasons. First of all, we all have this nature within ourselves to be selfish. It's called a sin nature. And we want to be inward focused, and we want to argue with God and say, well, your plan's dumb, God. My plan's better, and I like my plan better. So we have that going on within us, so it makes it hard to implement. And then also, in my opinion, we have all the forces of hell coming against us, wanting to keep you in bondage. Those forces want to keep you in spiritual bondage. They want to keep you in emotional and mental bondage. But yes, they also want to keep you in economic bondage. Why does God say give first? Now, if you're new, or even if you're not so new, and you hear a pastor say, give, you're thinking, here we go. And I get that. But hear me out. God says, bring 10% of what you receive to me first. And we talked about this last week. So if you missed that message, again, I highly encourage you, go online, listen to it. And he says this, he says, bring to me first, because left to our own devices, what we do is we spend 100% plus 50% more that we don't even receive. So we're spending 150% just on stuff here and now, and then we get so worried and so wrapped up about it, and we get into bondage, and we're just consumed with money and the stuff it can buy. Money's a big issue, and it's a touchy issue, because it's the number one competitor, Jesus says. It's the reason it's touchy, it's the number one competitor for your heart. Jesus says this in Matthew 6:24. He says, no one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other. You will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. And Jesus doesn't stutter there. He doesn't vacillate there. He says, you cannot. However, if you're in financial stress and you're in financial anxiety, and you hear Jesus, Jesus says in another place, Jesus says, give and you shall receive. You're like, what? What? Jesus, I don't even have enough money to pay the bills, and you want me to give? I get it. I get it. You're in financial stress, and it doesn't seem like such a great idea to give. And all I can tell you is God's plan works.
Amen.
Giving, first, recalibrates our minds and it recalibrates our spirits. It presses the reset button in our hearts, against that battle of materialism that wants to consume us. And it keeps us from being caught up so much in the here and now. And it reminds us that we are meant for something more. We are meant for something timeless, and it opens up God's blessings to flow into your life. Now, we had a couple of pies up here last week, and that's why I say you should never miss church at Holly Church. You don't know what you're going to miss. What you missed last week is you missed out on some pie. Now, some of you might be upset that you didn't get a piece of pie, but we had 2 pies up here last week, and we started handing out slices, and I said, this pie represents everything you make. And so the first slice, there's your mortgage, there's your rent, there's your utilities, there's your car, there's your groceries, there's your student loan debt, or as I like to say, your pre-student loan debt, your kids. So all this money goes out, and then you hear me say, hey, you need to honor God financially, and you look at that pie tin, and you see all these crumbs, and you here, Jesus. And that's not okay. Jesus doesn't want the crumbs. So, we had another pie out here, and we had this little tiny slice. It was 10%. And we set that aside because God says that belongs to me. That 10% is mine. It's not yours to eat. You don't eat that slice. You bring that slice. You return that slice to me. And God says, I gave you 100% of what you have, and I'm just asking for that 10% to be brought back to me. Now, when most people hear this, there's almost, not all people, some people hear it. Rhonda Nicole Haynes, she heard it, she's like, man, we're going to start tithing right now, immediately. But not most people are that way. Most people, they kind of push back. 10%. That's an awful lot. Now, are there any bargain shoppers in here? All right, this service got a lot more bargain shoppers. So, when you hear, hey, there's a 10% sale, right? That's like nothing. Give me 40, 50, 60, 90%. Then maybe we'll talk about it. So when you're shopping, 10% seems like absolutely nothing. But when we talk about being generous, 10% is all of a sudden it's like this huge amount. It's the same percentage. And God lays claim to the tithe. That's what it is. A tithe. Malachi 3:10, he says, bring the whole tithe. And it's bring because it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to him. Your neighbor borrows your lawnmower and they bring it back to you. Your neighbor doesn't say, hey, here, I'm giving you back your I'm giving you a lawnmower. No, they say, I'm bringing you your lawnmower because it's not their lawnmower. It's yours. Well, the tithe belongs to God. You're not giving it. You're bringing it to him. And you're not, the financial offerings are different. Financial offerings are over and above. They're outside that tithe. And you'll never be able to bring the tithe unless you just make it first. That's why it's the first little slice pie. If you don't make it first, before everything else, you won't do it. It's give first. That's why God says give first. Then God says save. And you're like, save? How can I save? God, you're having me bring 10%, then you want me to save? Well, to get to that point, the next step you have to take is you have to reduce and eliminate some financial stress by getting serious about getting rid of your debt and not producing more debt in your life. The current credit card, this is just credit card debt in America, is $1.04 trillion. That is not even a number that we can comprehend. Broken down, what that means is the average American has credit card debt of $4,293. And you're out there, some of you, mine's only $2,600. I'm doing good. But here's the thing. There's no such thing as good debt. I hear these people, that's good debt.
No, that isn't.
What?
No debt.
What kind of debt is good? Now, I know you can use debt, but what kind of good is debt? Good. And this debt, this credit card debt, these other kinds of debt are just crushing people. And it keeps you from doing things. It keeps you from being generous. It actually makes you a slave, according to God. Proverbs 22, verse 7, the borrower is slave to the lender. So, Jesus wants financial freedom for you, but debt wants financial bondage for you. Jesus says, I want you to be financially free, but it's kind of awkward to talk about debt. Because some people are embarrassed by it. Some people are totally frustrated by it. And I've already mentioned this, but, whenever a preacher talks about money, I say give, save, live on the rest. Immediately, especially if you don't know me that well, immediately you might say, hey, this guy has an angle. And if you're new here, you might not, you're like, can I trust this guy? Maybe you think I've got a private jet or something, got to take care of that private jet. And I get that there's some pastors, it's very few really, there are some pastors who have abused things for personal gain, but that's not what's happening here. I'm not buying any private jets. My wife, Jennifer, and I, we bring the full tithe, and we tithe on everything. Birthday, it doesn't matter what we receive. If we receive it, we bring the full tithe here. And we bring more than a tithe, and we give it here over that 10% because we believe in this church. And we believe what this church is doing to reach out, to share Jesus' love and Jesus' truth with people. Our church, your church is a generous church. It practices generosity itself. Before school began this year, Holly School, if you didn't notice, they're under a lot of construction over there. They didn't have any place to meet for their staff to do in-service, so we said, hey, come down here, use our building. We opened up the building for them to meet down here and do their in-service before school started. They were working really hard at getting ready for school on the Saturday before school, so the Saturday before Labor Day, they're up there working, and we took them pizza, pop, and salad just to bless them. We're getting ready to do Trick or Treat Street, which is for the entire community. And the last time Ryan and Heather Baker were here, our missionaries to Bolivia, I asked them about what we gave them, and they said, by far, your church gives more to us than any other church. Our church gives more. And sometimes I can get to thinking, if I'm not thinking quite correctly, I can get to thinking, the church isn't going to be able to take care of its household. Because some people get this misconception. The church family, the church has the same household bills as an individual household has. And sometimes I can get the feeling, hey, the church isn't going to have enough to take care of these households, its household bills and stuff. Maybe we should cut back, on what we give or not give this month or whatever. And then I have to recalibrate, my mind and say, no. We'll sponsor all those sports teams at the Boys and Girls Club. Let's send an extra check to the church planting mission here in Oregon this month. Let's give them a little extra money. And when we do that, every time God comes through, you can't outgive God. And I get there are abuses, and I get there are people that say, all the church wants is my money, and I'm going to push back hard on that. Because it's funny to me that nobody says that about the mortgage companies. Nobody says that about the credit card companies. Nobody says that about the grocery stores. No one says, all Home Depot wants is my money. That's all they want. Is your money. And they don't care if you mess up on that home project you're doing. Because if you mess up, you just got to go there and spend more. Because all they want is your money. The credit card companies don't root for you. They do these fancy little commercials that try to deceive you. Hey, priceless, all that. What does that have to do with high interest rate? But that's why they don't say, hey, borrow money. They show you these fancy little commercials. The credit card companies aren't rooting for you. They actually root against people like me. I'm a deadbeat to the credit card company. Now, if you're getting out of debt, when Jennifer and I were getting out of debt, we got rid of all our credit cards. But I'm a deadbeat to the credit card company because I pay off the bill entirely every month. So they consider me to be a deadbeat. They're actually rooting against you. They're actually hoping you mess up. And because all they want is your money. No one else roots for you. They root against you. And isn't it just a little ironic that the only place that cares about you is accused of only wanting your money? The one place that's actually rooting for you financially. The one person who's rooting for you financially, that is pulling for you to have financial freedom so you can live better here and now and live the life God intends you, is accused, of only wanting your money. Here's the truth. A lot of people who say all the church wants is your money, they say that because they don't want to be generous. They don't give, or they don't want to give, and they don't want to be challenged to give, to grow as a follower of Jesus, and to give sacrificially as He gave sacrificially. They don't want to be challenged that they don't have to have every toy, out there. And neither do your kids. Your kids don't need every toy. So if I talk about money, it's a convenient excuse to get offended and say, well, all they care about is your money, and I'm just calling you out on that. If you think for some reason that I just want, I'm just after your wallet, then find a church that you can give to, and please give to them. I bring them the time. See that what I'm telling you is the truth. I'm not after your wallet. I want your wallet fat. Now, I know debt can consume you, and debt can be a big issue in your life. So what I've done for you is I've produced 5 video modules that you can access off our Facebook page. So I got my notes here so I wouldn't mess up. But if you go to Holly Church Facebook page, the main Facebook page, if you haven't liked us yet, make sure to like us. But then on that page, you see the arrow that says groups. Click on groups, and ask to be a part of the Holly community group. Now, if you're already in that group, you're golden, you're already there, it's all taken care of. But if you're not in it, you can request to join that group. And once you've been approved, you can watch those 5 different modules. Facebook even keeps track of it for you, so if you forget where you're at, it just picks up right where you left off. And the great thing is you can watch those things over and over and over again if you need to. That will just help you, and I did this for you, to help you get out of financial stress. And some of you heard this last week, but if you've just never stepped out to tithe, which is really the keystone to financial health, achieving financial freedom, and the only way you're going to honor God financially is just stop the excuses and say, I'm going to do this. Now, the first slice isn't mine, that 10% slice, it's not mine, it's God's. And that's really scary. If you haven't been tithing, right? It's scary. Let's talk shop here. It's scary. You don't have to be afraid. It's scary. It is scary. Because what if you bring that, what if you give that, and all of a sudden an emergency happens, and you need that money? And that's scary, right? Well, I want to help you take the scary out of that. So what I'm going to say is this. If you'll make a commitment, I said next Sunday, it's on your connection card, but your next paycheck, if you just say, I want to make the commitment to begin tithing, you're not tithing now, I'm going to make that commitment to do so, beginning with my next paycheck, I'm going to bring God 10%, I'm going to do that for the rest of the year. And anywhere along the line, if something happens, every dollar is refundable to you. Now, it has to be trackable giving. You're using the offering envelope or you're giving online, so it's trackable. So let me be clear. Let me be clear. If you're willing to begin tithing, you haven't done that, and you're willing to begin until the end of the year, you're getting a money-back guarantee from a church. And what kind of church does that? Well, a church that wants something for you. A church that cares about you. A church that doesn't want you to miss eternity because you're so tangled up in the here and now. I do not want something from you. I want something for you. And I want you to know how good it feels to be generous and to honor God financially, to live for something timeless.